Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen. Today we commemorate Malaya and Borneo Veterans Day and recognise the Australian military personnel who fought in the Malayan Emergency 1948 to 1960 and the Indonesian Confrontation 1962 to 1966. The Malayan Emergency was declared on the 18th of June 1948 after the murder of 3 European estate managers by guerrillas working for the Malaysian Communist Party. While the British commitment was largely a politically driven hearts and minds campaign conducted to bring the Malays on side, troops were also committed to fight the counter-insurgency. In 1955, the Australian Army was committed. 2 RAR was supported by 105 Field Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery. 3 RAR and A Field Battery replaced them in 1957, conducting successful operations which led to the state of Perak being declared secure in 1959. While the Malayan Emergency was officially declared over on the 31st of July 1960, limited communist guerrilla activity continued for some years afterwards. In the early to mid-1960s, Indonesia and Malaysia fought an undeclared war which came to involve troops from Australia, Britain, and New Zealand. Under the leadership of President Sukarno, who opposed the formation of the Federation of Malaysia, Indonesian forces carried out armed incursions, subversion, and sabotage to destabilise the Federation. Fighting began in earnest when Indonesia launched a series of cross-border raids into Malaysian territory in early 1963. Australia's commitment to operations against Indonesia in Borneo and West Malaysia began with 3 RAR and 1 SAS squadron deploying to Sarawak and Brunei in early 1965, where they fought as part of a larger British force. 4 RAR and 2 SAS squadrons served in Sarawak in 1966. Australia also sent detachments from the Royal Australian Signals Corps, an artillery detachment, and 5 squadrons of the Royal Australian Engineers to Borneo. Ships of the Royal Australian Navy served in the surrounding waters, and several Royal Australian Air Force squadrons were also involved. As Australia and Indonesia maintained their diplomatic relationship, these cross-border operations remained secret until 1996, and confrontation received little coverage in the Australian press. Continuing negotiations between Indonesia and Malaysia ended the conflict, and the 2 sides signed a peace treaty in Bangkok in August 1966. Today, we pay our respects to Australians who died as a result of their service during the Malayan Emergency and the Indonesian Confrontation, who were commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Private James Ian Decent, who died while serving in the Malayan Emergency in March 1956. His story will be told shortly by Signalman Bobby Barr-Jones from the Australian Army, who is Private Decent's great-nephew. We are honoured to acknowledge Major General Michael Ryan, Commander of the Australian Defence College, accompanied by Professor Beatrice Heuser, Air Vice Marshal Kim Osley, retired, Brigadier Michael Mahi, retired, representing 2 RAR Association, and Mr John King, President of the Returned and Services League Australia ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of Blackall's Park Public School, New South Wales. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. fountain, nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Those requiring a seat, please do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of the names on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private James Ian Deason. James Deason was born on the 10th of October 1935 in Sydney, New South Wales, to Ian and Kathleen Deason. He was one of three and their only son. His father served during the Second World War with the 2nd 1st Battalion, and after being captured by the Germans in the Middle East, spent until May 1945 as a prisoner of war. He returned to Australia in September that year and was discharged from the AIF. Sadly, his marriage with Kathleen did not survive, and they separated in the years after the war. James grew up in North Sydney and enjoyed swimming, reading and playing basketball. After gaining his intermediate school certificate at the end of 1951, he began an apprenticeship in January 1952 as a machinist and fitter with the New South Wales Department of Railways. 2 years into his apprenticeship, seeking greater opportunities, Private Deason applied to join the Australian Army. Despite being underage, his mother gave her written consent on the 3rd of May 1954, and he enlisted at Marrickville, signing on for a 6-year term. He was initially sent to 1RTB at Kapooka for basic training, after which he was posted to the 4th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, which was the training battalion for infantry soldiers at the time. Deason was then posted to the 2nd Battalion in June 1955. At this time, the battalion was preparing to deploy to Malaya to conduct counter-insurgency operations in the Malayan emergency. This conflict was a guerrilla war that had been going on since 1948 between communist pro-independence fighters of the Malay National Liberation Army and the British Commonwealth Armed Forces. 2 RAR arrived in Malay in October 1955 and was based in Mindin Barracks, Penang. The battalion deployed to the Malayan mainland on the 1st of January 1956 and were deployed on Operation Deuce, a search and security operation in the Kedah State. In March, a number of men, including Deason, were sent on leave. The men took the train to the coastal town of Pra, during which they travelled with their rifles loaded in case of an ambush. The men then boarded the ferry at Pra for the trip to Penang. It was just after 5 p.m. when a soldier's weapon accidentally discharged. A single round fractured Deason's right hip and perforated his bowel. He was rushed to Bukit Metajam Hospital, where he immediately underwent surgery. The operation was thought to be successful, but Deason remained on the dangerously ill list. His initial prognosis for recovery was good, though convalescence was expected to take considerable time. Deason's condition changed suddenly in the early hours of the 23rd of March, and he died just after 10 a.m. that morning. He was laid to rest the following day with full military honours in the Kumanting Road Christian Cemetery, Taiping. The inscription on his headstone reads, "In memory of our darling Jim, loved son and brother, ever in our thoughts and prayers." He was 20 years old. His name is listed on the roll of honour on my left, one of 39 Australians who died as a result of their service during the Malayan emergency. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is one but many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private James Ian Deason, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.